Welcome to the Growth with AI podcast, hosted by Integrated AI Services. I'm Peter Martinson, and today's episode dives into how AI is reshaping the world of brand storytelling and content creation. Our guest is Kristen Sweeney, founder of Every Little Word, a consultancy known for elevating brand voice through thoughtful strategy, sharp messaging, and content that actually sounds human. Kristen, it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So tell me your story. How did you get started doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a long journey. I will try to compress it a bit for purposes of our conversation, but I will say I didn't enter marketing or communications by a traditional path. My college degrees are in musical theater and medieval studies, because only an actor would think that medieval studies is a really sensible backup degree to have. I did want to pursue musical theater professionally, and I did for a number of years. So after graduating undergrad, I went on to graduate school at the Boston Conservatory, which is now part of Berkeley up in Boston, and from there moved to New York. During that time period, I was there for close to 10 years in the city. I worked a little bit in the city and regionally all over the country, from Wisconsin to Las Vegas to Maine, in a number of productions, and it was a really fascinating and wonderful part of my life, and still is. I still consider myself a performer at heart. If you know any performers, though, you know that usually it is not their performing jobs that pay their bills and act as their economic engine. So I also had pretty much every day job under the sun. One of those day jobs, which became a big important part of kind of a second career for me, was teaching yoga. But
Hmm.
another was writing, freelance writing. I had worked at a estate planning law firm as a legal assistant. It was kind of one of the first versions of a remote job. That this is like 2008, 2009.
Oh,
Everything
wow.
files sent through email. I was still transcribing by hand with my foot pedal, so really kind of back in the day at this point. And the attorney that I worked for was a prolific writer, not just legal documents for his clients, but he wrote a lot about, tax policy and his perspectives on planning and things like that. He started having me edit his work with a pretty broad scope of just like, what do you think? Make this better. And eventually he was the person who introduced me to my first clients. The very first people I worked with were physicians, his clients, who, for one reason or another, had some kind of opportunity to do writing, and they didn't feel comfortable or able to capitalize on that opportunity for themselves. They liked writing, but weren't good at it. They were good at it, but didn't have time for it. And in some cases, English was not their first language. And so, although from a speaking perspective, they were completely comfortable and confident, when it came to the written word, they didn't have that same level of confidence in communicating their ideas. So my very first jobs were ghostwriting for physicians. And this thread of working with experts, facilitating them sharing their knowledge and expertise, and then translating that into the right format has really continued to be the thread that carries through to our work today. So fast forward a lot of years. My my first daughter was born in 2019, kind of took stock of everything I was doing, which was a lot of different things at that point in time, and realized that writing and what was more turning into communications work, content work, marketing work, as I was acquiring all these other skill sets to better serve clients, was instead of like pushing the boulder uphill, which theater and performing can certainly feel like, was more like chasing the boulder downhill, or at least maybe cross country skiing, right? Like at a minimum. So I decided to put my focus in that area. Eventually grew the business, hooked up with a great channel partner who really amped up our sales in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, hired my first team members, and have been growing ever since. We rebranded to Every Little Word, I think about 3 years ago. At that point, previously we were Kristen Sweeney Consulting, which I just found to be the most cringe name ever for somebody with a team. It just was not for me. I couldn't stand it. So we've been Every Little Word for a few years now, but our DNA really goes back about 15 plus years.
Wow. There's a lot of stuff there that we could talk about. But my first question is, so can you actually sing? Do you have a singing voice?
I
If you
do.
were in
I
wow.
do.
I am I am envious. I'm one of those people that people pay me not to sing, even at karaoke events.
Well, if you want to, the real come down is your children, right? Because they're like, I'm singing along to their favorite song on the radio, and they're like, "Mommy, don't sing." And I'm like, people used to pay me actual money to do this. They're like, "We don't care."
Wow. And I would love to talk a little bit about the medieval studies, but that's really not what what we're here to discuss. So, but I do. There's a statement on your website that I really want to just talk about because it's a fascinating statement that you're not anti AI, you're just pro human, which
Mhm.
I think is great. But I'm curious, like do you use AI in your process, and can you describe like when and how you decide to use that?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually published a white paper on this exact topic, which I'll be happy to share with you and share with our readers as well. It's ungated, and it documents um a paper's just a couple months old, like what AI looks like in our process today, and a lot of the why we've made certain choices, where we've included it and where we haven't. I What I will say is I have an interesting relationship with the sort of AI in the business because I was on maternity leave with my second daughter. As you can tell, it's been the last 5 years have been very full, both personally and professionally, right? And the way I describe it is like I opened up LinkedIn one day on maternity leave, had probably a baby sleeping right on my chest. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, my profession is over. Like AI was everywhere. This was like like late winter of 23, I would say.
Hmm.
And so I went through a period of great fear, right? Then I went through probably a period of great resistance and saying like, no, I can't do what we do. But one of the things I would say I'm most grateful for, honestly, is that I think AI has pushed me to explore technology and sort of the leading edge of things in a way that I really never have in a way with my business. I sort of had these assumptions about certain skill sets we had that were going to be there forever and we could rely on them, and a lot of assumptions baked in. By nature, I'm not the kind of person who's like the earliest adopter, honestly. I tend to be a little slower. I want to feel things out. And so although in some ways I'm probably still in that camp relative to others, AI has given me reason to think a lot about what our value really is in the business, in the way that we serve clients, where we can augment it, and where we maybe need to kind of move on or refocus or let things go. So that's a lot of framing to say we use AI and we use technology and tools all the time.
Right.
Starts with, conversations with subject matter experts. I know this seems obvious to everybody right now, but when I first started doing this, we weren't able to record calls and get transcripts. If I wanted notes, I had to speak. And so my legal background served me quite well because I'm quite a fast typist. And I was literally like basically transcribing in real time while talking to the person and trying to ask them questions and engage them in conversation. So you can imagine how much easier some of those auto transcribe tools, like first and foremost, I
Yes,
know that's not the most glamorous application, but wow, has it made life a whole lot easier.
it really does. Yeah.
We use tools like Grammarly, right, all the time just to evaluate and interact with. It doesn't mean we're going to accept every change, but we use it as part of our quality process to make sure that everything we're producing is is meeting our standards, along with a level of human edit and QA internally. We use it for um, I think we use it a lot for research, and I'll say there's a lot of preparation for us that goes into getting ready for a content asset. So a lot of the way that we work, we create what I call expert-led content. And so what that means is we are talking to executives, subject matter experts, very technical folks, and we're creating some kind of content asset that's going to come out of their unique expertise. In
Mm.
order to set us up really well for that conversation, we generally don't want to be going in at the 101 level, because usually the end audience we're going to try to talk to isn't at the 101 level. They're somewhere in between knowing nothing and knowing what our expert knows. And it's part of our job to figure out like how to calibrate that end result to where their level of knowledge is. But so we can't go in and ask super basic questions, even if it's a topic that's unknown to us. AI is super helpful for saying, like, give me a primer on this. I don't understand that. Okay, I see this thing, but help me understand that in more basic language. So it gives us a quick and easy foundation to come in and then ask better questions and have better conversations. So it's a really quick way to kind of get up to speed. We use it for things like headline ideation, naming, honestly, with a little bit of like zhuzhing and then jumping off point. I would say like my team is very independent, but if you want to see our Slack channel light up, like just put, oh, I have something we need to name. What do you think about these ideas? And just like, everybody's got some input. So kind of a fun thing too, but um great for things like that where it's just kind of getting you out of your head or seeing those combinations. And in those circumstances, to me, it's not that I'm expecting the perfect answer from it. And so that's what I find for me it's the most useful for. We don't use it a ton for drafting. To us, we found that the output from an LLM at this point, even when prompted, even with a lot of background context, would take so much reworking and revisioning to get where we need our end product to be. And that's not the same for every kind of end product, but it's the kind of content that we create that it's not worth it. And the comparison I can make is like we've we've lived a version of this in all human form, right? So if we're working with a junior writer and my editor in chief gets something and she feels like I basically had to rewrite this or I basically had to go back to the source material to see what we were really trying to achieve and whether this piece really achieved the goals, that's inefficient. And she will come to me and say, we have a problem here. That's something that we would flag and experience we have had with a purely human team. And so for us, that was the same kind of experience we've had when looking at something really comprehensive, like can you create a first draft of an article? Of course we've tried it. We want to know,
Yep.
But for us, it was that sense of if I'm going to invest that much time in the editing piece and the revisions and the updating, I'm actually better off doing it on my own from the beginning. And I think that's one thing that to me is a little glossed over right now in the AI discourse is the like, you get it, of course it's not perfect, and then you just edit it. Those of us who are editors know that that's a really hard job. It takes a very specific skill set. And in my belief, editing that's not a full sort of rewrite, like in our company, we think about that as like a 20% improvement. Like we want a piece to come in at like 80% of where it finally needs to be in a draft. Editing can improve it another 15 or 20%, and QA maybe pushes it like that last 5% to get it where it needs to be. But if editing is a process that's adjusting 40, 50, 70% of what you've got, you're not really editing anymore. You're doing something very, very different.
Yeah. So I've heard and experienced a little bit of the same thing with writing code, having LLMs
Yeah.
write code. You get code, and if it doesn't quite do what you want, going through the code to figure out why not, how to fix it, you might as well have just written it
Yes.
yourself to begin with, because then you at least you know what's in there and you know where everything is and you know how it's supposed to work. And so yeah, so
Yeah.
I I see the parallels look like they're kind of the same.
And what's interesting about that, and I kind of just have this theory that like where an LLM is the most useful is where you are the least skilled. So for me, I don't can't write a lick of code. It would be great if I got something that was kind of close, right? That would be such a massive improvement for me versus what I can do today,
Mhm.
but not the same for you because you have a different skill set.
Yeah. So, wow, fascinating. Um, so um, trying to figure out where to go next with that. So for your team, when you've in the last couple of years started using some of these tools, how has your team changed, either in structure or the people you're bringing on, into your team? Has that changed at all because there's this new tool and maybe it can do some things really well, and so you don't need people there anymore, but you need other people, where it can't do things to your satisfaction. Can you talk about how your team has changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier this year, I think it was, we underwent kind of a bigger exploration around AI and we put things in a couple different categories. So one category, of course, was like, what are we doing that we could just give up and give over to AI, right? Like it could do it just as well. What pieces
Mm.
of our work could we just kind of replace with AI? But then there was this piece around where are there areas where we could add more value than we can add today with our current capabilities? So an example, and I'll be honest, I don't think we've solved this, but we were interested in saying infographics are something we have some graphics, some design capabilities, but it's not our core capability. Our core capability is writing. How easy or not would it be for us to incorporate infographics? Are there AI tools that could support us and do that really effectively and help us add more value without, opening up a new line of business or bringing a new employee on board? Mixed success in that regard, but that's the kind of thing that we also know that that's ongoing. And we meet quarterly to discuss AI initiatives, potential risks. So we know, like, if it's not there today, like, let's look again in 3 months because suddenly that capability may be there. I would say that in terms of the team, I don't think our core skill sets have changed much, but I think that AI has a little bit opened up more capability to cross over. We have a small team, so we have to think about how we cover each other, right? We have a whole documentation of responsibilities for each role and who covers what, things like that. But I think there's been a little bit more ability to cross over. For example, my account managers able to maybe with AI as a partner, do a little bit more of some of the foundational pieces around a content brief or a content strategy. And then I'm able to come in and be a little bit more efficient with my time because she can support me and
Mm.
she is supported with AI in some cases. So that's what I would say. It kind of helps us almost like cover or overlap each other a little bit in a way that for a small team like ours, that little bit of redundancy, that little buffer is important and quite valuable.
Gotcha. So I don't remember the exact context, but you just mentioned the word risks. So what can you talk to us a little bit about risks that you see to using AI or not using your AI? Again, I don't remember the exact thing that you said, but I caught the word risk. So I'm curious where you see that.
Yeah, so I think it is mostly for us when we think about risk around data, client data, our data, protecting data. I think in those regards. So an example was like something that surfaced and again because the technology is changing, we have to stay on top of this regularly. Something around, oh, if you've ever shared a link with someone from a chat, now that link is indexable and could be found on the internet. So we were like, "Oh, okay. Well, first, let's go delete any shared links." I think we had like one, but just be safe. And then let's go update our policy so that not only our team, but any freelancers we may work with or new folks who may come in have it really explicitly laid out like, you can't do this, or you need to be using our team account because we have the privacy settings the way that we want them that's going to protect our clients. So things like that. So just evaluating those pieces and as little updates kind of sneak in there, making sure we're on top of those again, mostly around privacy. I think in terms of the risks of using or not using I mean, at this point, I don't think it's for us and a small business that's got to consider a lot of different factors, especially in what's a pretty tough economic climate right now. I think that it's sensible to use it where it makes sense. And there are places in our workflows and in this white paper I mentioned, like there are times when we have tried to augment with AI and we've actually reversed our decision because um, it didn't it didn't help.
Hmm.
So an example is when we create a content brief um, to go from kind of the strategy and an expert conversation into, okay, now it's time to actually write and create the content asset. There's a bunch of background resources and includes the interview recording. We set the writer up with everything they need. And then I will either create an outline or record a loom, provide notes. Like I give my sort of vision as the strategist for what's the angle, what's the through line here. Well, then we were doing that, but also providing like an AI summary of the conversation. And it was just like too much. It was too many different versions of the material. And at the end, when we evaluated and said, well, what was the most helpful? It was still like the thing Kristen gives. that can
Yeah,
even
human.
rambly, even if like it had the strongest point of view, and that's the core of what was really needed. And so we ditched it because we said this is just creating one more thing for people to look through. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Ethan Malik, who's the AI professor. He's got this like hilarious thread where it's just like how ChatGPT can create PowerPoints and more PowerPoints and PowerPoints and PowerPoints and you're never going to want for lack of material. I think one of the things you have to do is say like, is this adding more noise or is it helping us kind of identify the signal in what we're trying to do?
Yes, and human beings get overwhelmed very quickly with too many choices, right?
Yeah.
Give somebody 3 choices, it's easy to make a decision. Give somebody 30 choices, and it's really hard sometimes to decide which one you're gonna go for, so yeah.
Yeah.
So are you using AI anywhere else in the business for lead generation or for handling emails or for keeping all of your handling like routine and tedious tasks to free up your people to do the creative stuff more?
Interesting. I would say probably in ways I don't even know about. One of the things we use it for all the time is like SOP generation and things like that, where we're like, here's the process, you're able to kind of dictate to it, something like that, where you just kind of need like just the facts check, like just it's not about the quality of writing, it's not about the quality of the ideas. You just need to convey these steps in logical order. I use it for things like that. I also use a voice to text tool that I like a
Hmm.
lot. Really helpful for me. One, just to sometimes like give my eyes a break from looking at a screen for a second that I can like kind of talk out loud. And if I am doing some of my own writing, I recently started my own Substack in addition to kind of what we're doing on the corporate side. It's really helpful. Like, no, I was like, oh, no wonder our clients like this process so much, talking out their thoughts. It's great. So I
Yeah.
use that a lot and I'm able to, quickly turn that into it's not a draft, but it's all my ideas all in one place and then go through kind of my own writing and editing process from there. So
Oh,
we,
yeah.
we do use it throughout. We've got a kind of automation wizard in our director of finance, and so I know he's got a lot of automation set up for us, and that's one thing I would say is that um sometimes we might think, oh, do we need AI, but it turns out what we need is like to document
Automation.
or then
Yeah.
make a system, but it could still be manual, and then maybe it's automated but it's still not AI. And like, so I think it's important to kind of go through those steps. But again, I think the idea of AI and that you could be doing better um has caused us to be a bit more reflective and look and say, okay, maybe it isn't all the way. We don't need an AI tool, but we kind of had nothing. And we could build a system that
Mm.
would be extremely efficient for us over time.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's a good place to start wrapping up. So to finish up, what do you want people who might hire you to know about you and your firm?
Oh, I appreciate that. So, Every Little Word is a boutique content and communications agency. And I would say, in an age where, keep it in our theme, right? Anyone can create just about anything with AI. What really stands out is the kind of content that comes from real lived expertise and experience. And so that's the kind of content we create, expert led content that helps organizations earn attention and build trust with their audiences.
Fantastic. Well, I personally think that we definitely need more of the human written content. And so putting some guardrails on the AI content. Well, Kristen, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's been a great conversation. And, I hope we talk again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.